right, welcome back everybody to another week of Fantasy Premier League. So we started off this series on Game Week 2 last week. Obviously, once again, I would have liked to have started on Game Week 1, but hey, life happens. So just it's going to be a shorter intro for today. Basically, what we're going to go through, same as usual, I'm going to go through my team from last week. How did it perform? How well did my strategy work out? Where were the shortcomings? I think we can I easily identify those, being Salah, Fernandez, Bundia, Star. Midfield was a complete disaster, but hey, sometimes that happens. And what we're also going to do is we are going to take a look at what my strategy is for this week, and mainly focused around how to beat Pep Roulette. If you're not familiar with what that is, I'll get into it, because if you're new to fantasy, this you're going to want to pay attention to this. Alright, so this was my team from last week. If you missed last week's episode, you can briefly familiarize yourself with the players on screen now. This glaring error that I'm sure hit everybody was the midfield during this week. Salah underperformed, Fernandez underperformed, Bundia, Sar, they just did not work out well. My best midfielder was Yves Bissouma, who was on my bench because, well, that's the way it goes in fantasy sometimes. The Sar, I'm not too upset about that. It was a wild shot. It was actually more of a hedging my bets type of move, because I had the Brighton goalkeeper. I had Sanchez on my team, and it worked out. He put up the clean sheet. Obviously, if he puts up a clean sheet, Sar isn't going to get any fantasy points. That's pretty cut and dry. That's fine. Bundy, on the other hand, it's 2 weeks in a row where, yeah, it takes some time, but what have you done for me lately? And not much. Where Ings is still performing. He scored a beautiful goal. Unfortunately, he wasn't given the penalty. They gave that to El Ghazi, but I will take my 8 points and be very happy with that. That Liverpool versus Burnley game. Wow. I mean, Alexander-Arnold and Tsimikas is a Greek god after those first 2 weeks. It sucks that Andy Robertson's back, so he's probably out of everybody's fantasy team now, and mine including, but we'll get to that later. But he had a great match. And same thing with Trent. However, Salah, watching that game was so painful. My guy should have had at least 2 goals and 2 assists, but he gets nothing. And thankfully he gets a clean sheet bonus, so 3 points times 2. I cannot tell you how disappointed I was, because it was such a coin flip for me between captaining him and captaining Fernandez. So after that game, I was cursing myself. Should have gone with Fernandez. Should have backed my guy. I'm a United fan. I should have backed Fernandez. And then I watched the Southampton game, and oh boy, it sucked having to watch that game as a United fan, but I felt so good. I should have captained Antonio. Should have captained pretty much anybody else in my squad, but at least I didn't captain Fernandez. I always... it's the small victories, people. That Man United game, you can address it with both Fernandez and Luke Shaw. It was atrocious. It was just so bad to watch, but life as a United fan. It's definitely up there. It's one of the worst games I've watched. And actually sat all the way through. I think the worst one has to go to, they played West Brom a couple years ago, way back, probably 2016. And they lost to a deflected free kick, and De Gea was rude and just couldn't get anything going. Yeah, well, past is the past. Let's talk about it now. Sanchez, clean sheet, great bounce back after allowing a Burnley goal in week 1, but yeah, credit to him, did well. Alexander-Arnold, phenomenal performance. Tsimikas, Greek god. I called him a value bargain pickup. Way outplayed that designation. He was absolutely phenomenal. Salah, disappointing, could have been so much better. And it's a case of he was in the right places at the right times, and just for whatever, he had an offside call, should have played a pass or should have shot. It's just one of those things where he was in the right places, had the chances there for him, but just it didn't come to fruition. Whereas Fernandez, I don't even want to talk about. I don't want to talk about it. It was just a mess. Bundia, once again, it's disappointing, but not to the same extent. I had higher hopes for him, but it wasn't quite the letdown that the Salah and Fernandez performance was. My forwards, thank you so much, Danny Ings, DCL, Mikel Antonio, the legend. He single-handedly saved my game week. I thought, it was, even still, with the 75 points, decent 4-point deduction, it's fine. I still finished in the top 10%, and it's all to Mikel Antonio. This man is phenomenal. Anyway, you can see here, you see the points on screen. I finished in the top 10%, which is a W, but obviously could have been much better if Salah and Fernandez had played up to expectations. But that's life. It was still a decent game week. Managed to recover some points. Let's move on to next week, and I will show you my strategy of how to outplay Pep Roulette. Alright, so now, as you can see on screen, this is my selected Fantasy Premier League team for Game Week 3. And if you notice, compare it to the Game Week 2 team, there is a lot of substitutions. In fact, the only players who are remaining from Game Week 2 to Game Week 3 are Mikel Antonio and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And I think a few of you may have caught on to the fact, yes, I used my first chip of the season. I used my wild card, which means all the transfers were free and the team stakes. If you use free hit, all the transfers are free. However, your team resets to its previous version at the next game week. These guys are here to stay. So let's work from the back. Obviously, Lloris going against Watford. Tottenham is looking decent. He's been decent. To this point in the season, first 2 game weeks, he's been solid. Then, as you can see in the back line, yes, Cresswell, but you're seeing the 3 Manchester City players. And you might be thinking that is a big risk. Like, yes, they're playing Arsenal, but 1 goal and that entire wall goes toppling down. This is how I beat Pep Roulette. See, if you don't know what Pep Roulette is, here's a basic explanation. Pep Guardiola is manager of Manchester City, and there are so many good players in that squad that you can never really accurately predict who he's going to roll with. It's always a gamble in terms of picking his players. So what I have done is, how do you gamble against which players he's picking? You take all the players. So my strategy is you focus on a specific position, defenders, midfielders, or forwards. You try and load it up as much as possible in terms of what he will be able to play. Then, what I've done is I have my replacements on the bench. I have Richarlison, I have Pascal Gross. Those are my 2 substitutions. I think at least one of them has got to be in the game week between Laporte, Cancelo, and Diaz. It's possible that all 3 are there, but I'm thinking at least one. At least one has got to be there. My money is on Diaz as being the most likely. Cancelo, I think this might be a rest week for him, and if that's the case, cool, he gets swapped out. Now we're rocking a 3-4-3. And then, if one more gets swapped out, you can see I have Jansen on the bench. It actually works out pretty perfectly. Cancelo is my best guess for being substitute. Laporte was rested during game week 1. I don't think he'll be rested this game week. Diaz, like he has played both game weeks, but it's Ruben Diaz. He has actually been fairly solid. Like, the Tottenham match wasn't great, but, I mean, he showed out with Laporte against Norwich. Kind of hard not to, but, you know, credit where it's due. They're defenders that also get involved in the attack. They have the potential to put up big points. And one of those things that the reason I gravitated towards focusing in on the defenders is with midfielders and forwards, Pep will swap them out during the game. His backline will always, it'll stay solid. What he starts with will typically go throughout the game unless there's some extenuating circumstances. Now, with that being said, that's the guide to beating Pep Roulette. This is how I'm choosing to approach it, because if two of them don't play, that's fine. I have replacements. It can work. So, moving on. Midfielder, Benrahma, Greenwood, Pogba, Son. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. West Ham is going up against Crystal Palace. They have looked unstoppable for the past 2 weeks. Mikel Antonio, Benrahma firing on all cylinders. Cresswell, icing on the cake if they manage to get a clean sheet. Like, how could you not be picking them at this point? If you're like, you better be having a good reason if you're passing up on Benrahma and Mikel Antonio for this game week. Now, Greenwood and Pogba. I see a lot of people going for the Fernandez route. I opted for a different strategy. Whereas Fernandez, yes, he's a great player. He has the potential to get involved way more, both with free kicks and penalty kicks. However, with Greenwood and Pogba, both of them, you get the ulterior. Whereas if with Fernandez, your eggs are all in that one basket. Maybe you have a goal that he might be involved in, but then there's another goal that he's not. Chances are Greenwood or Pogba, it's both assisting on his goal or assisting or scoring the other goal that he wasn't involved in. It's a better way of covering all the bases and going up against a struggling Wolves team. I like to play all the angles as opposed to focusing on one key part. Because even if Fernandez is scoring all the goals, one of those two is going to be the assist on it, and I would much rather that. Then, moving on, Son, like I said, for Lloris, they're going against Watford. He has a chance to run wide, and Kane is there. It's a deadly duo. the world is their oyster. And then finally, up front, we got Calvert-Lewin. There were rumors of him playing through a toe injury that he suffered through preseason. If that is the case, I mean, it's a little something to be nervous about, but it certainly hasn't hurt his play throughout this part of the season. So we'll keep him in there. Like I said, Antonio and Calvert-Lewin, only ones that stuck around from game week 2. I used my wild card, and the bench is ready in case substitutions need to be made. This is my ideal game week team for both this week, and it actually sets me up pretty well for next week. But that's a story for another time. Best of luck this week. If you like the video, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know how your team goes. If it does well and I helped you out, well, you're welcome. But nonetheless, I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you next week. Have a good one. Peace.